connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Esther Adanga and welcome to ASEAN in Focus.
Hello, Esther, and to all our online viewers, I am Crystal Ann Ballesteros, bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines.
For the 2022.
2 days after saying he might run for Vice President, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte opted to seek a senatorial seat in the May 9, 2022 national and local elections.
A U.S. journalist imprisoned in Myanmar since May has been released and deported from the country days after being sentenced to 11 years in jail.
President Rodrigo Roa Duterte on Monday approved the recommendation of the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases to lift the mandatory use of face shields in areas under Alert Level 1 to 3.
And Indonesian President Joko Widodo takes on his custom motorbike to test the new Mandalika International Circuit in Lombok Island. The street circuit will host World Superbike Race this month and is scheduled to host MotoGP in March next year.
Our news, 2 days after saying he might run for Vice President, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte opted to seek a senatorial seat in the May 9, 2022 national and local elections. Take a look.
For the 2022 national and local elections, this day, I think the biggest news was, I guess, the withdrawal of a candidate and the substitution of President Rodrigo Duterte for the position of senator. So again, so it's official. PRRD is running for the position of senator in the coming 2022 elections.
The President filed for senator under the PDDS. Ito po ang partido na inorganize at ginawa namin noong 2018 na kanila to continue the aspirations of the President for the country, pagpatuloy ang kanya pong mga programa. The PDP and the PDDS are in cooperation, coalition, and alliance. So, isang grupo po yan.
This after lawyer Melchor Aranas filed Duterte's Certificate of Candidacy or COC on Monday, the last day of the filing of statements of withdrawal and substitution at the Commission on Elections or COMELEC in Intramuros, Manila. Meanwhile, COMELEC spokesperson James Jimenez said the poll body received a total of 19 statements of withdrawal and withdrawal with substitution during the filing period. 3 statements of withdrawal were submitted, while 4 statements of withdrawal with substitution were filed for the position of President. For the position of Vice President, 4 statements of withdrawal and withdrawal with substitution were received by COMELEC Law Department. The COMELEC also received 4 statements of withdrawal and 5 statements of withdrawal with substitution for Senator. Jimenez said the list of all substitutions remain tentative pending issues that are still to be resolved.
Meanwhile, Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte on Sunday said that the offer to run for Vice President on the country or of the country is an opportunity to meet her supporters halfway and to serve the country.
Nagdesisyon na ako na huwag tumakbong pagkapangulo ng Pilipinas. Subalit, wala pa ring humpay ang inyong mga panawagan kahit na pagkalipas ng 8 ng Oktubre. I have thousands of supporters who cried last October 8, and I cannot find it in my heart to make them cry again on November 15. After the deadline, the offer to run for Vice President became an opportunity to meet you halfway. It's a path that would allow me to heed your call to serve our country and make me a stronger person and public servant in the years that lie ahead. I am here to answer your call. I appeal to all supporters to stay calm. The problems of PDP are their own. Let them resolve the issues within their party. This is all politics, and this will not matter in the years to come.
Sara Duterte on Saturday entered the vice presidential race for the 2022 elections in a surprise move that could boost the chances of presidential hopeful Ferdinand Marcos Jr. winning the country's highest office. Sara Duterte, 43, had been widely expected to seek the presidency in a bid to succeed her father. Her tilt for the country's second highest office was immediately endorsed by the party of Marcos Jr., the son and namesake of the former dictator, to be his running mate in the poll.
Meanwhile, Secretary Harry Roque described his journey as Malacanang spokesperson as mission accomplished. Few hours before he went to the Commission on Elections on Monday to file his certificate of candidacy for senator in May 2022 elections. Let's listen in.
Okay. So sasagutin ko na po ang inyong katanungan. Ito na po ang huling araw na makakasama niyo ako bilang inyong presidential spokes, IATF spokes at spokes ng bayan. Kung inyong matatandaan, bumalik naman po ako bilang spokes sa gitna ng pandemya noong isang taon para magbigay linaw sa panahon ng kalituhan. Masaya akong mission accomplished na po tayo ha. Iiwan ko ang trabaho ko na mas mabuti kumpara sa ating nadatnan. Nasa 100% na po ang vaccination coverage ng Metro Manila. Mahigit 20% na ang NCR. Ang epicentro ng COVID-19 ay fully vaccinated na. Nasa mahigit 40% na po ang fully vaccinated sa buong Pilipinas. Malapit na marating ang population protection. Ang healthcare utilization rate po natin, base sa ating piniresenta kanina, ay nasa below 40% na lamang. Nagawa po natin ang ingat buhay. Babalik po tayo sa larangan ng politika, babalik po sana tayo sa Kongreso ng Pilipinas, doon po sa Kamara ng Senado. Nagpaalam na po ako kay Presidente Rodrigo Roa Duterte at kay Mayor Inday Sara Duterte para sa panibagong hamon na aking haharapin mula sa inyong pagiging spokes ay nais ko pong maging action man sa Senado. Bago tayo magtapos, magpapasalamat lang po ako sa lahat ng aking nakasama rito po sa Office of the Presidential Spokesperson.
He said his move was also the fulfillment of his promise to Sara that he would run for senator if presidential daughter will seek a national post. On Saturday, Sara filed her COC to run for vice president to heed the people's clamor to serve the country.
Nograles, a lawyer, once served as spokesperson of the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Infectious Diseases or IATF-EID and is currently the head of the Task Force on Zero Hunger, a government's campaign to fight hunger. Let's listen in.
Pero nag-file ng certificate niya kanina ata. He will be running for senator. Alam mo, once you file your certificate of candidacy, automatic yan, out ka sa gobyerno. Kung maaari, ikaw na lang sana ang acting na muna until we find a replacement. I do not want to burden you with so much, alam ko yung paperwork dadaan sa iyo.
Roque bid goodbye as presidential spokesperson and IATF-EID spokesman during his last palace press briefing on Monday before heading to the COMELEC to file his COC on the final day of filing of statements for withdrawal and substitution. Roque, a former Congress representative, is running for senator under the People's Reform Party, substituting Paulo Mario Marcelino.
President Rodrigo Roa Duterte on Monday approved the recommendation of the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases, or IATF-EID, to lift the mandatory use of the face shields in the areas under alert level 1 to 3. Let's watch this.
Is that define the wearing of the mask cumbersome. So maybe it limits the range of sight of people working where the eyes is plays an important ingredient in their work. So maraming nagrereklamo. Decision ko is okay, tanggalin na ninyo yung shield. Pwede na ninyong you dispense with the shield but not the mask. Yung mask will forever remain and it will be a part of our safety measure. Kasi matagal pa itong virus na nasa hangin lang.
He urged the public to make sure that the COVID-19 positivity rate in the country will continue to go down by following the health and safety protocols. On Monday, Executive Secretary Salvador Medial-Diaz issued a memorandum detailing the voluntary use of face shields in places with a relatively low COVID-19 alert level. According to the memorandum, the use of face shields in community settings shall remain mandatory in areas under alert level 5 and granular lockdowns. For places under alert level 4, local government units and private establishments are given the discretion to maintain or remove the wearing of face shields policy. People residing in places under alert levels 3, 2, and 1 can voluntarily use the face shields as their added protection.
So, maraming nagrereklamo.
On another news, a U.S. journalist imprisoned in Myanmar since May has been released and deported from the country days after being sentenced to 11 years in jail. Danny Fenster was being taken to the capital Nay Pyi Taw from Yangon, where he was jailed and would be deported, a government source told AFP, speaking on condition of anonymity. He had been working at a local outlet Frontier Myanmar for around a year and was arrested as he headed home to see his family in May. Junta spokesman Zhao Mintun confirmed that he has been released and will be deported. Fenster, who spent 176 days in detention, was sentenced to 11 years in prison last week for encouraging dissent against the military unlawful association and breaching immigration law. The 37-year-old was due to go on trial Tuesday on charges of terrorism and sedition, which could have been seen him jailed for life. Earlier this month, former U.S. diplomat and hostage negotiator Bill Richardson met Junta Chief Min Aung Hlaing in the capital Nay Pyi Taw, handing the increasingly isolated junta some rare publicity. Richardson said at the time that the U.S. State Department had asked him not to raise Fenster's case during his visit. Fenster is believed to have contracted COVID-19 during his detention. Family members said during a conference call with American journalists in August.
In a related news, Danny Fenster, handed an 11-year sentence last week for incitement, unlawful association, and breaching visa rules, was freed on Monday, a day before he was to face terror and sedition charges that could have seen him jailed for life. The 37-year-old looked gaunt with his hair and beard grown longer during captivity as he emerged from a jet in Qatari capital Doha with former U.S. diplomat Bill Richardson. Take a look.
No, I'm feeling all right physically. It's just the same privations and things that come with any form of incarceration. You just go a little stir crazy. The longer it drags on, the more worried you are that it's just never gonna end. So that was the biggest concern, just staying sane through that. I was arrested and held in captivity for no reason, so I suppose so. But physically, I was healthy. I wasn't starved or beaten.
Journalists still detained. Do you have any words for them?
Yeah. That's. We're gonna keep the focus on them as much as possible and do everything we can to lobby on their behalf. We're still trying really hard and hoping that we can get them out of there.
Say how pleased I am. This story is about Danny coming home to America, but I also want to thank the Qatari government that is supportive of my foundation that helps secure the release of hostages, American and non-American.
On Monday, he was pardoned and released on humanitarian grounds, the junta said, ending 176 days spent in a colonial-era prison where many of Myanmar's most famous dissidents have been held. The 37-year-old's release was secured following face-to-face negotiations between former U.S. diplomat Bill Richardson and junta chief Min Aung Hlaing, Richardson's organization said in a statement. In a statement, the family expressed their relief at Fenster's release. Fenster had been working at Frontier Myanmar, a local outlet in Southeast Asian country, for around a year and was arrested as he headed home to see his family in May. Myanmar's military has squeezed the press since taking power in February coup, arresting dozens of journalists critical of its crackdown on dissent, which has killed more than 1,200 people, according to a local monitoring group.
And the United States, which had said Fenster was unjustly and wrongfully detained, welcomed his release. Let's listen in.
Join Secretary Blinken and the rest of the country in welcoming the release of U.S. journalist Daniel Fenster from prison in Burma, where he was wrongfully detained for almost 6 months. We are extremely grateful that Danny will soon be reunited with his family as we continue to call for the release of others who remain unjustly imprisoned in Burma.
Fenster's father Buddy expressed relief after speaking with his son on the phone, saying there was nothing harder on a parent than knowing a child is in distress and being unable to help. More than 100 journalists have been arrested since the putsch, according to reporting ASEAN, a monitoring group. It says at least 30 are still in detention.
Now let's go over here in Thailand, where the country's energy minister has defended the government's decision to cap the retail price of diesel fuel at 30 baht per liter. We have more details from Jomril Baraldo. Hello, Jomril.
Hello, Esther. Thailand's Energy Minister Supatanapong Kunmichao backed up the government's decision to peg the retail price on diesel fuel at 30 baht per liter, despite the truck's drivers' demand to lower the cap price. He added that the current price has been maintained by past leaders, including the current administration. 500 truck drivers affiliated with the Land Transport Federation of Thailand is set to assemble for a rally today in front of the Energy Ministry to amplify their call to peg down the diesel price to be at 25 baht per liter. However, the minister seems adamant about the petition, as he repeatedly explained the use of the oil fund to help relieve the impact of diesel prices on consumers. Additionally, he mentioned that the actual diesel price today should be much than the current price, but the government and its predecessors have been trying to maintain it at 30 baht per liter. Today, the energy minister will not be present to face the representatives of the protesting truck drivers, as he has prior commitment in the mobile cabinet meeting in Krabi. He appointed alternate officials to receive the petition of the assembly representatives. Thailand's diesel price at gas stations are currently above the 30 baht per liter price. The record high prices are caused by the global surge in fuel prices, which is also stemming from surging demands as several countries are emerging from COVID-19 lockdowns. It was earlier this month when acting president of the federation said that 70 to 80,000 out of 400,000 truck operated by its members have ceased operations for 7 days to step pressure on the government to act on this matter. Trucks are essential means of transport for consumer goods, import and exports, and construction materials. Back to you, Esther.
Thank you, John Merle, for that update and for your time. You stay safe and stay healthy.
You stay safe too. Reporting live from EBC Thailand Bureau, I am John Merle Baldo, and we live in interesting times.
And the news continues here in ASEAN in Focus after this short break.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Ay lalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced, eagle news, because we live in interesting times.
Are you having fun?
This one, the zigzags. Dalawang the zigzags.
Gusto ko yan ah.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to speak Tagalog.
I told you not to go to, you go to, now look up.
If you want to say hello in Tagalog, you have to say, pangit ako.
It's your baby, the missing baby, you go here.
Minsan, mas madali pang kumausap ng kambing kaysa mag-English eh. Wait lang, meh. Ang hirap kalasin. Laughter is the best merienda.
Hindi ako malunggay. Diyan ka magaling. Saan man?
Takakulitan, diyan ka magaling. Funniest Nakaball videos.
Welcome back to the program. Fully vaccinated healthcare workers may get their third dose or booster shot of the COVID-19 vaccine starting November 17, the Department of Health or DOH said. In a public advisory released Monday night, the DOH recommended Moderna, Pfizer, and Sinovac as booster doses, regardless of the brand used in the primary series. The DOH said the National Vaccine Operations Center will issue the booster shot guidelines on November 16. while the use of a third dose has yet to be approved for the general population pending results of studies. Health experts said all the vaccines continue to provide strong protection against severe illness, hospitalization, and death from COVID-19. In the US, its Food and Drug Administration has authorized booster shots for adults at high risk of severe COVID-19 because of underlying medical conditions and for healthcare workers.
The latest shipment of the U.S.-donated Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine to the Philippines arrived Monday night, further boosting the country's supply as it readies booster shots for healthcare workers. The plane carrying a total of 301,860 doses coursed through the COVAX facility arrived at Ninoy Aquino International Airport or NAIA Terminal 3 around 10:10 in the evening. In an interview, Assistant Secretary Wilben Mayor, National Task Force Against COVID-19 Strategic Communications Head on Current Operations, thanked the U.S. government for the donation. He said these vaccines would be intended for the healthcare workers, senior citizens, persons with comorbidities, and the indigent population. Meanwhile, fully vaccinated healthcare workers may avail of booster shots starting November 17.
And President Rodrigo Duterte called on the local government units or LGUs to pass local ordinances restricting unvaccinated minors to roam around public places. Duterte also advised the parents to keep their children away from the dreaded virus, citing a report that a 2-year-old child tested positive for COVID-19 3 days after visiting a mall. Let's listen in.
We still need to be cautious. I saw a recent report whereby a 2-year-old child was tested positive for COVID-19 after visiting a mall. Alam ko kayong mga magulang gustong-gusto ninyong ipasyal ang mga anak ninyo after staying for so long inside your home due to lockdowns. Pero isipin ninyo kung maliliit pa ang mga anak ninyo at hindi pa bakunado, do not expose them to the virus or virus. Wala pa silang depensa. They have no defense mechanism in their system in bodies of COVID-19. Hindi katulad ng mga bakunado na. On this note, I am calling all local government units to consider passing ordinances for age restriction among minors who can be allowed to go to the malls. Certainly, we cannot allow those below 12 years old or those getting or still unvaccinated to be exposed to the risk of getting COVID-19 in public places.
In other news, Singaporeans voiced support for the government's announcement last week that it would stop paying the coronavirus medical bills of those who are unvaccinated by choice. Let's take a look.
I feel that if it is a viable alternative, because as of now the government has already been given ample time and options for the unvaccinated people to take their vaccines, short of those who have medical issues. So I think it's a good way for them to convince the unvaccinated people to take their vaccines.
You know, there's obviously the hesitancy. I mean, kind of understandable. This vaccine came out pretty fast, so I can kind of understand, you know, especially the initial reactions where people are sort of hesitant of like, okay, is this really safe? Is it really effective? But you know, it's been almost a year. You know, billions of people have already taken it. I think, you know, it's about time now that people start to realize that, okay, you know what, this isn't that bad,
From my opinion, the government doing it in the face by face, right? They're not telling that, oh, by tomorrow, if you catch COVID, then you're not gonna get medical paid by the government. But they are giving like at least a 1 month period for people to think about it and then to register and to get vaccinated. So I think it's quite fair.
Personally, I do support it because as members of society, we have to play our part. And of course, if the individuals choose not to be vaccinated, it's within their rights not to be. And of course, they will have to pay the price of the medical bills because in a way, it is causing unnecessary medical bills, unnecessary medical beds.
Of course, that will be some motivation. We call it motivation. It's not really the government needed money. Really want you to fully vaccinated, not because of money. The money for government is nothing, but for the health, they're concerned about all other people.
Singapore will, from next month, stop paying coronavirus medical bills of those who are unvaccinated by choice, officials have said, as a fierce outbreak put the city-state's healthcare system under strain. The tiny country is experiencing its worst COVID-19 wave since the start of the pandemic, reporting around 2,000 to 3,000 cases a day and a handful of deaths. The government had always covered the medical bills of all Singaporeans and other residents in certain categories infected with the virus, except for those who tested positive soon after returning from overseas. But from December 8, authorities will begin charging COVID-19 patients who are unvaccinated by choice, the Ministry of Health said Monday. Those affected will still be able to use regular financing arrangements to cover the costs, such as private insurance. Bills for those who are ineligible for vaccination, such as children under 12 or those with certain medical conditions, will still be fully paid. Singapore has one of the world's highest vaccination rates, with 85% of its 5.5 million population fully inoculated. It has a mild outbreak by global standards and only faced a substantial virus wave in recent months after being hit by the Delta variant.
Meanwhile, the city government of Manila has received 2 cold chain equipment from the Japanese government through the United Nations Children's Fund or UNICEF Philippines for the storage of COVID-19 vaccines. Vice Mayor Honey Lacuna and City Health Department Chief Dr. Arnold Pangan welcomed the Japanese Ambassador Koshikawa Kazuhiko and some officials of UNICEF Philippines during the turnover ceremony at the Manila City Hall on Monday. Quote, "This will further strengthen our storage capability and effectiveness in handling the vaccines against COVID-19, end of quote," Lacuna said in her speech. She assured the government of Japan that the city will continue with its COVID-19 vaccination program rollout, including minors aged 12 to 17. On Monday, the city government inoculated 554 minors with second doses to raise its tally to an overall of 56,832 doses for the young age group. As for the adult population, 1,292,617 already have the full doses out of the estimated 1.3 million target. More news are coming as the ASEAN in Focus will be right back.
Welcome back. Thailand's economy shrank in the third quarter, official data showed Monday, but hopes for a gradual recovery are picking up after the kingdom's reopening to foreign tourists this month. The country last year suffered its worst performance since the Asian financial crisis of 1997, with a 6.1% economic contraction. Gross domestic product shrank 0.3% year-on-year in the third quarter, the Office of National Economic and Social Development Council, or NESDC, said, blaming it on COVID restrictions. The measures to control the outbreak affected the economic activities, said Danucha Pichayana, Secretary General of Board of NESDC, on Monday during a news conference. According to NESDC data, the food service and accommodation sector shrunk 18.6% July to September because of a decrease in domestic tourism and household spending. In Bangkok, a key hotspot during Delta wave, restrictions only started to ease in recent weeks, with the government allowing certain restaurants to reopen and serve alcohol. The relaxation of COVID restrictions, along with a gradual return of vaccinated foreign tourists since November 1, has officials hopeful for growth of 1.2% this year.
Meanwhile, a tank in Indonesia's largest oil refinery caught fire on Saturday that may have started by a lightning strike, according to an official. The blaze broke out at the tank of the Cilacap oil refinery in Java Island, owned by state oil company Pertamina, during a lightning storm, said the refinery's general manager, Eko Sunarno. The officials were currently trying to extinguish the fire before they could investigate the exact cause. Sonarno further said no casualties were recorded as both workers and locals in nearby neighborhoods were evacuated immediately. This was the second time fire raging in the Cilacap oil refinery, which processes 270,000 barrels of crude oil daily. This year, a similar tank was in flames also after a lightning storm. In March, about 8,000 people were evacuated as fire engulfed 4 oil storage tanks at the Balongan refinery in West Java. Before the fire, an explosion was heard as lightning and thunders hit the area.
Crystal and I will be back after this short break.
Solusyon, aksyon, re-responde na ang bagong aksyonan ng bayan. Abangan, Responde, mata ng mamamayan, dito sa Net 25.
Welcome sa pinakabagong game show ng Net 25. Maraming salamat po sa napakainit na pagtanggap niyo sa akin para maging bahagi ng saya at panalo agad-agad.
It's been a while and you deserve it. That dimples should be seen everywhere.
Kaya simulan na natin ang pamimigay ng agad-agad na kasiyahan at siyahan dito sa newest game show na diskarte at bilis ng kamay ang puhunan. 3 rounds ang paglalabanan ng 4 na players. Isa sa kanila ang magwawagi ng 20,000 pesos na posibleng umabot ng hanggang 100,000 pesos!
Sigurado kung maiuwi ko ang premyo na 20,000. Sigurado ako.
Yan!
Nasa akin eh.
Bakit dapat na sa'yo yan?
Nakita ko dun eh. Kala ko, tara, game! Agad-agad! Kinuha ko.
Ito na ang pangalawang agawan choices. 17,100. Oh. 12,000. C. 400,000. D. 1.7 million. Agad-agad. Pinindot siya ni Wes, so ikaw ang sasagot na to. Natakot ka sa numbers.
Pag numbers kasi, kainis eh. Pero pag talent free numbers, masaya yun.
Alex, sino ang pinipili mong sasagot ng tanong na yan?
Wilma.
Ang bilis.
Alam mo bakit?
Bakit?
Wilma doesn't know.
And I'm your Tara Game Master, Aga Mulak. And this is Tara Game! Agad! Agad!
Welcome back. Indonesian President Joko Widodo takes on his custom motorbike to test the new Mandalika International Circuit in Lombok Island. The street circuit will host World Superbike race this month and is scheduled to host MotoGP in March next year. The street circuit will host World Superbike and Asia Talent Cup races this month and is scheduled to host MotoGP in March next year. Widodo was riding his customized Kawasaki W175 retro motorcycle along with some of his ministers and other officials. The 4.3 kilometers long circuit will be MotoGP's first street circuit. Indonesia has been absent in MotoGP calendar for more than 20 years after the race in Sentul International Circuit in West Java in 1997.
Since the signing of the Paris Agreement in 2015, some progress has been made in the transition to cleaner energy sources, but it has been too slow. The International Energy Agency believes that reaching net zero emissions will help limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, but the task is immense and involves costly social and economic upheaval. Let's take a look.
The 2015 Paris Climate Agreement was a moment of optimism. The world had rallied around a common cause, lowering emissions of greenhouse gases, attempting to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. 6 years on, climate change is now a climate crisis. The efforts made so far have not been enough.
Net zero by 2050, blah, blah, blah. Net zero, blah, blah, blah. Climate neutral, blah, blah, blah.
And it's not only Greta Thunberg that thinks so. This map shows the effectiveness of actions taken by 36 countries to try and keep the 1.5 goal alive. Only the Gambia, a tiny nation in West Africa, is doing enough to help meet the target. The biggest driver of global warming are carbon dioxide emissions, and the biggest cause of these emissions is the burning of fossil fuels. We have known this for years. And yet, from 2009 to 2019, the world's consumption of these fuels barely changed. So why are our energy consumption habits so slow to change? Electricity production is a key issue. In 2018, it was responsible for 40% of the world's total CO2 emissions. Coal-fired power plants produce a third of the world's electricity. Finding ways to retire these plants and produce cleaner power is a top priority, but where to begin? 80% of new coal power stations planned worldwide are in Asia, where electricity needs are growing. Two of the region's biggest economies, India and China, are both highly dependent on coal for their electricity. China has committed to stop funding coal-fired plants abroad, but more than 360 of them are currently under construction in China itself. And electricity shortages in early November pushed Chinese authorities to ramp up coal production by more than 1 million tons. Even though renewable energy sources are now cheaper in many cases, they are not trusted to deliver the power needed in a market where coal is synonymous with energy security. Many also fear catastrophic knock-on effects if coal-fired plants were to cease production, including mass unemployment in the plants and in related sectors. But things have improved. As the costs associated with wind and solar power have decreased, these sources have become more widespread. Renewable energies now constitute the world's second biggest source of electricity. In 2019, more than a quarter of electricity was produced from renewable energy sources. They are now more used than gas and nuclear power, but still lag behind coal, the most polluting energy source. One of the major stumbling blocks in the energy transition is funding. According to the International Energy Agency, to achieve net zero by 2050, annual investment in clean energy worldwide will need to reach $4 trillion by 2030. That's more than triple the current level. Many countries have committed to becoming carbon neutral in the coming decades. China and Russia have set 2060 as the goal. India is aiming for 2070. But just as important as countries are companies. What action are they taking? In the car industry, a widespread switch to electric vehicles is underway. Leading names like Volvo and Jaguar have committed to going 100% electric in the coming decades. But for now, roads remain crowded with polluting cars. Consumers still opt for gas-guzzling SUVs, accounting for 42% of total car sales in 2020. Airlines around the world have also pledged to aim for net zero emissions. The International Air Transport Association has set 2050 as the deadline. But this net zero goal is tough to square with projected passenger numbers, which are set to double over the same timeline. Airlines are placing their hopes in the development of sustainable aviation fuels derived from organic products like cooking oil and algae. But these fuels are 4 times more expensive than kerosene. In 2019, they accounted for less than 0.1% of the fuel used in aviation. Researchers say it will not be possible to keep global warming below 2 degrees without a drastic reduction in air traffic. One option to force companies to reduce their emissions is carbon pricing. It can take the form of a tax on pollution or a requirement to buy emissions permits, which can be traded. The problem is in the pricing. A ton of carbon should cost between $40 and $80 to effectively dissuade companies from using fossil fuels. But worldwide, the price per ton of carbon is under $10 for the vast majority of emissions under pricing schemes. The European Union has been a pioneer in this field and wants to extend the scheme to the construction and road transport sectors. But the knock-on effect is an increase in the cost of living for consumers, with increased likelihood of social unrest. 2020 saw a dramatic drop in CO2 emissions. But as the world reopens after COVID-19, they are now projected to reach a record high in 2023. The COP26 climate summit in Glasgow saw a range of pledges from various countries, from phasing out coal-fired power to ending the financing of new fossil fuel projects overseas. The question now is whether these promises can be delivered on. Developed nations have so far failed to make good on plans to raise $100 billion a year by 2020 to help developing nations make the energy transition, a pledge that was first made in 2009.
And that's the latest news in the ASEAN region. Thank you for joining us today here in ASEAN in Focus. This is Crystal Ann Ballesteros from your EBC Cambodia Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
And thank you for staying with us today. That's for today's podcast. I'm Esra Odanga from EBC Thailand Bureau, and we live in interesting times.